Yes, right, we're running. So, just on Port Ellen, and we are, Christ, we're into the final 5. Bloody hell, 5 more to go. So, the next 2 are sort of cheating, but kind of not. And the reason that they're sort of cheating is that the next 2 are from the same distillery and are named after distilleries, or are named after places that don't exist. And strictly speaking, I shouldn't really include them because they're from the same distillery, which is Bruichladdich, but they are 2 brands from Bruichladdich that have become known individually. So they're actually, and they're different enough from the standard Bruichladdich, as we'll find out on Saturday night when I do it live, when I do the Bruichladdich Classic live, is their standard version. Practically unpeated and very, very different to these 2 that I'm going to do now. And are different enough that I'm counting them as 2 separate brands. Not distilleries, but brands. Although one of them was a distillery and potentially might become a distillery again. And it's this one, which I should do first, which is the Port Charlotte Isla Barley. So this is from, this is a sample that I nabbed from the guys at the Whisky Lounge in York. So Joe Clark, Eddie Ludlow, Amanda Ludlow, all the other guys there, Connors, all you you lovely lads and ladies. Yeah, thank you for this. And Port Charlotte was actually a distillery, and it was known, well, it was originally known as Port Charlotte, but was also known as Lochindaal, after the lock in the middle. So this is the map, and I'm pretty certain it shows Lochindaal on there. If the one I'm thinking of doesn't, it will be a different map, but it should be the same one. I'm sure Port Charlotte was shown on the map that I've shown you on all the others. And Lochindaal is the kind of lock in the middle of the island. So you've got Port Charlotte on one side and Bamore Distillery on the other. It was built in 1829 the license was granted to a guy called Colin Campbell, and there was a village that was built at the same time, and it was kind of like a business venture in terms of building the distillery purpose built with the village to provide accommodation for the workers at the distillery. And it was it had a number of owners up to what we're looking at 1929, where it was sort of pretty uneventful. It kind of ticked along. It changed hands a few times, but nothing particularly interesting, to be perfectly honest. I'm kind of reading this stuff going, yeah, okay, it changed hands, but nothing fantastic. Until, DCL, Distillers Company Limited. We've covered them a number of times throughout the challenge. DCL, who are essentially the kind of the precursor to Diageo, took over the distillery in 1929 and closed it down. Gone. Surplus to requirements, tough time for the whisky industry, no real use for Lochindaal / Port Charlotte, closed it down. Equipment taken away, a number of the buildings then used for, I think one of them was for like a creamery, another was used for a youth hostel, and basically was just, Port Charlotte was no more. Now, some very, very old bottlings were found by Bruichladdich, who found that Port Charlotte was actually quite a heavily peated spirit. Now, Bruichladdich had been known for being practically unpeated, very light, very easy to drink, and they were looking to expand their range and basically go, well, we can do peated versions. So they went, right, let's do a different brand, let's do a different version of Bruichladdich, and it's not going to be Bruichladdich, we're going to call it Port Charlotte. So Port Charlotte was first launched in 2001, and it was one where there's been slightly different versions of it as well, sort of limited releases and things like this. But in 2007 they actually bought some of the old buildings and the grounds of the Port Charlotte distillery with a view of rebuilding and reopening and revitalising the entire Port Charlotte distillery. So it was going to be Port Charlotte, rebirth, phoenix from the flames. Here we go with a distillery, would have been owned by Bruichladdich, but it would have been a sister distillery doing a heavily peated version. Unfortunately, 2007 was around the same time that we had global financial crash, recession, credit crunch, call it what you will, money down the pan, and just they couldn't make it financially viable to invest to be able to do the distillery. It's not cheap building a new distillery, because you then have to wait for 3 years before you can get any bloody money back. So it wasn't viable for them. Now, And I'll go into this as well when I eventually. I'm not going to talk about Bruichladdich the distillery because I'll do that on Saturday. But Bruichladdich were then bought by Remy Cointreau in 2012, which then put another spanner in the works. There are still rumours going on that it will happen, but it's very, very difficult to say whether it will or not. They still have the land, they still have the buildings. I think they still want to do it. But obviously you've now got French owners that you have to appease and try and give yourself a viable, constructive business plan to say, if you will invest X million pounds, we can give you this in 10 years. So it's still very much up in the air. So that's where we are with Port Charlotte in terms of a distillery that did exist and kind of still does, but actually it's from Bruichladdich. So it's a heavily peated Bruichladdich. Now this particular one is called the Port Charlotte Isla Barley. God, that's only just enough. And this is what the bottle looks like. You are looking at 55 quid at Master of Malt, and it's released at 50%. So Isla Barley is exactly what it says on the tin. They have used barley purely from Isla. There's a few releases that Bruichladdich have done of some of their other ranges where it was Scottish barley, but this is Isla barley. So this is barley grown just on Isla, and that's it. So it's as homegrown as you could possibly make it. So in terms of colour, quite a light colour. Now this is non-age statement. I think it's about a 7-year-old. I think it's like 6, 7, 8-year-old, I think, but I'm not 100% certain. But it's quite light in colour, so I'm kind of going to go with that. Again, I don't actually know what cask it was matured in either. I'm not too sure. I could look it up. No, people have got better things to do than watch me looking at a web page. So yeah, not 100% certain what sherry cask it is. It might be sherry cask. If people do know, stick it in the comments just so that people can try and find out. But it's quite a nice kind of healthy white wine colour, but it's got a really nice sparkle to it as well. It looks really fresh. Okay, there's definitely peatiness on it, but it's a very fresh, citrusy peatiness. Almost not even lemons, more going towards lime. It's really zesty. It's a and the peatiness is very intense, and it's not we're not talking bonfire smoke, and we're not talking black pepper. It is quite antiseptic, and I think that's where I'm getting that liminess from it as well. It's close to an antiseptic medicinal peatiness. It really is. It's really bright. It's really fresh. I really like that nose. There's a slight leathery element to it as well, but it's like new leather. We're not talking like aged whiskey, old leather. This really is like almost new car leather. It really does have that kind of like antiseptic, very, very clean, brand new car with leather seats that haven't been touched. Nobody's sat in this car, and you've opened the door and sat down, and you get this really intense, really clean cut car smell, which is a lovely smell. I like that nose a lot. Ooh, ooh, blimey, that really evolves. It starts off very smooth and quite light. There's a bit of a silky thread through, and then all of a sudden there's this burst of, it starts off peppery, it kind of hits the tip of your tongue and then moves to the back of your throat as you swallow, and it just brings peat in kind of almost like pulses with peat that get more and more intense, and it becomes quite earthy. So it's less medicinal than it is on the nose. The nose is quite medicinal, but the palate is much more earthy, very much kind of fresh dirt, fresh soil, fresh dry soil as well. But it builds and builds and builds to a crescendo, and then just leaves you with this, I'm not going to say mouthful of dirt, but it leaves your mouth with this really earthy, peppery smokiness, kind of barbecuey smokiness as well. There's a slight sweetness to it. That's a cracking whiskey if you like peated whiskies. If you don't, you're going to bloody hate this. This is full on, and I haven't even got to my third yet. That is going to be full on. But yeah, this really is kind of, there's all sorts going on here. There's antiseptic on the nose, there's a light deft touch, before all of a sudden, thwack, it really gets you. But it's a really earthy, barbecuey, slightly ashy, but we're not getting down that cigarette note, which I appreciate, because I don't like that cigarette ashiness that you get. It's kind of barbecue and earth. It's like you've done a barbecue on the ground on bare earth, and it's slightly charred the earth itself. Doesn't need water. Really doesn't need water. I think water would really just kill that like a stone. I think it would knock down the peatiness that's there. It's quite deft. It starts off, like I say, it's slightly silky, slightly citrusy, and then these waves of peat come in and become more intense. And I think any water on that is just going to kill it. It's just going to knock it down, and you're not really going to have much there. It's going to be a bit wishy-washy. That's really good, but unusual, because it builds. It starts off quite slowly and then builds and builds and builds, and it's like, whoa, hang on, this is fun. This is a fun ride. This really does take you on a journey. I like that a lot, and I think for 55 quid, that's not a bad price. It's okay. I think that's about a fair price. I like that. So I'm going to do a quick rinse out. I'm going to need to drink some more water to get rid of this earthy taste out of my mouth, and then I'm going to go for something that, potentially is going to knock my socks off and possibly my mouth. So I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.